Thank you. Let's bring in Fox News contributor Leslie Marshall and former senior advisor to the Senate Judiciary Committee, Garrett Ventry. Thank you both. Garrett, to you first. Ben Domenech, I thought, made a fair point today when he was saying, you know, the whole idea of criminalizing political speech is kind of amazing. He says, what's next? Do we indict people who were saying that Al Gore won in 2000, Hillary Clinton for saying that Donald Trump's not a legitimate president? What's happening? Where is this going politically?
Well, that's exactly the precedent that Jack Smith wants to set here, right, is which going after free speech, political speech that's protected clearly under the First Amendment that President Trump had every legal right to bring up under the Constitution and the First Amendment, like we just said here. The second part of this is what you just brought up, Trace. I mean, you'd have to go back. Al Gore rejected the results of the 2000 election. Barbara Boxer, senator from California in 2005, rejected those results. In 2016, Raskin and Jayapal, members of Congress, a number of them, rejected those results. So you'd have to essentially throw everybody in jail there. The second part of this, though, is the timing, which is very interesting. The first indictment, which Mike Davis just brought up, which I think is very important here, is the document case. 24 hours before that, we learned that Joe Biden was allegedly involved in a bribery scheme from an FBI informant who's seen to be credible here within, you know, what Comer and Grassley have said. And then the second indictment, which comes today, we learned just yesterday that Devon Archer, a business partner and longtime associate and friend of Hunter Biden, is alleging that as a firsthand witness, Joe Biden, you know, essentially was the sell from Hunter Biden to these foreign business associates and was put on speakerphone over 20 times. And so, again, I think all of this is coming out in a very interesting time here.
Sure. I mean, you're not the first one to note that. I mean, the Congressman Mike Johnson tweeted the following, quoting here, "It's no surprise at all that following Devon Archer's damning testimony yesterday, the DOJ drops more charges against President Trump. Their efforts at distraction can never change the real problem. President Biden is in serious trouble." And like he's pointing out, Leslie, it's not just this time. I mean, it's happened a couple of times. There's a pattern here of releasing this information, indicting the president at key times, which maybe it's nothing, but it just looks kind of interesting.
I would agree that the timing looks interesting. I would also have to say, just to start with, you got to read the entire transcript of Archer's testimony, which he clearly repeats over and over. Joe Biden did not discuss business in those conversations.
Well, we haven't read the transcript
it was almost
yet.
like Hunter was like, my dad is the vice president.
Transcript hasn't
Let me
been
call him
released
on
yet.
the phone and he'll say hi to you. That's very different than Joe
we
Biden
haven't
being
released the
involved in
transcript yet.
any business dealings.
Wouldn't we need the transcript to be released before we actually know word for
all
word?
of the portions of the transcript thus far that we have seen through not just journalists but congressional members on both sides of the aisle that have quoted them, what we have seen so far, I would just like to have that in its entirety. I'm going to say this. I am not a big fan of the former president, but I would say that this actually looks worse for the 6 co-conspirators, the latest indictment. And the reason for that is, with the exception of former Vice President Mike Pence saying that he was pressured, which I'm really not sure the First Amendment, that's a gray area, would cover. You can have free speech, but you can't pressure me to do something illegal, which overturning an election would be, or unconstitutional. But the 6 who we think the 6 co-conspirators are, they have the fingers pointed at them more so than Donald Trump in trying to take actions to subvert.
Meantime, I want to put this poll up. This is New York Times Siena poll. You know, head to head, you've got the New York Times saying this. I mean, it's a dead heat. It is a dead heat. And if you look at the stakes and the delegate breakdown, it's bad news for Joe Biden. Trump gaining in points, but hemorrhaging money, Garrett, because he's got to fight all these legal fees.
Well, yeah, and I think that's why, again, the timing of these indictments are so interesting. They could have did this 2.5 years ago. And you got to remember, this is Joe Biden's DOJ as Attorney General's hand-picked special prosecutor trying to put Joe Biden's political opponent in jail here. And this poll head-to-head here, I think, is very interesting here. It's showing in this poll, not only is it 43-43 Biden-Trump deadlocked, but in this poll, you're seeing 39% of voters only approving of Joe Biden's presidency. That is an abysmal number. And 65% of voters saying it's going in the wrong direction. The last thing I'll say is this. If you dig into the poll and you look at the results here, Donald Trump there's really good news for him that he's gaining steam with African-American voters and Hispanic voters. Those are key voting blocks, obviously, that are going to decide the 2024 election. So, again, head-to-head here, I think this is really good news for President Trump as we continue to see Joe Biden slip in the polls. And, again, the state of the economy and those things are not a good look for him.
What about you, Leslie? Are you surprised that he's gaining steam on this? I mean, nobody's surprised that he's gaining steam, but to this point where it was always like, hey, if we get him into the general election, we're in great shape. Well, now not so much.
Well, look, if my party and the DOJ were completely politically motivated, they wouldn't have any indictments, because every time there's an indictment, his poll numbers go up and he gets more support, and that I'm the victim actually looks to ring true, especially with people that are his base or might jump over and become part of his base. That number that I'm looking at, 43-43, I'm not worried, I'm not surprised. And if you look at the last few elections, that's where we're at as a nation. We're very much a split nation. It comes down to about 5 states and independent voters that are going to determine, as they have the last 2 general elections, who's going to be president and who isn't. And then lastly, I would say for the approval rating of Joe Biden, do I like that number as a Democrat? No. However, that was like the number when we went into the midterms. And again, Joe Biden, as a sitting president, fared very well with the few number of House seats that were lost by Democrats and keeping control or gaining control of the Senate.
Bad number, though. It's a bad number for approval rating. Leslie,
Long way to
Garrett,
go.
thank you so much.